All right. So something I've been wanting to kind of do is this, when beta types take over the world goes to war, which is a gross oversimplification of things, but it's just kind of fun to get into this kind of stuff. So been kind of sitting on this for a long time, and I'm like, yeah, let's wing it. Let's just get into this already. So let's talk about where we are politically around the world and things going on, conflicts and so on. What types are out there? We have the war in Ukraine, right? Russia and Ukraine obviously fighting it out over there. We now have Israel fighting it out against Gaza. We have Iran now jumping into the mix. We, of course, have some other players that are trying to help from the peripheries, like the United States. Um, and what's interesting to kind of note around here is just how many of these saber rattling or flat out fighting leaders are actually beta types, which kind of ties into how betas are often conflicting, warring, ideological purposes, all this other stuff. And sometimes people want to challenge that notion. It's like, okay, get challenged, you can get into it. But let's think about it. All right, so let's see. Yay, the world map. All right. So Russia and Ukraine over here for my people who are geographically challenged. So who's in charge of Russia? Well, Vladimir Putin. I don't think I really need to show you a picture of him. I hope that by now everybody knows who Putin is or has heard of him. And if you haven't, get out from the rock you're hiding under and go check it out. Putin, pretty much unanimously thought of as an LSI. I think it's almost one of the most non-controversial typings there is. Now, Ukraine, we currently have uh, Zelensky. And I'm going to come over here. Here's a little write-up done over here by the World Socionics Society, over here with Jack's group. I think who wrote this? Probably Peter Bartle. Nope, not Peter Bartle. I stand corrected. I think that's Kip. So here's a nice write-up if you want to look into it. They kind of put him as an EIE based on what I've seen from him and this nice little write-up. I have to agree. EIE is probably on the money right there. Feel free to look it up, which I encourage. One of the things I can't stand is when people just spit out a type and are like, no, I think he's actually an IEE, period. And they have nothing to follow that up. Like, if you think someone's a type, give us some reasoning, give us something. Otherwise, shut up. Your opinion is fucking useless. And here, you can read up on the write up, see what you think of that, so on. Go to World Socionic Society or give us your own 2 cents. Okay. But EIE, another beta, right? Other people around the world that are interesting. Who else is causing problems? I'm going to jump over to China really quick, just because I'm on this side of the world. China, we're kind of concerned about, very concerned. We're going to go to war over Taiwan and so on, and this whole damn region is going to explode. Now, who's in charge of China? Well, we have our good friend Xi Jinping. For those of you who are unfamiliar with him, that's who he is and what he looks like. Get a load of him in all his glory. Okay. This guy I haven't completely dove into, but given his very singular minded kind of attitude, and he's really formed a dictatorship over there in China. Really has. Um, I would say he's another LSI. And for those who are kind of like, well, dictators are here and there, it's like, yeah, listen, China is much more of a dictatorship in actual practice than some of the other countries. At least Putin actually has oligarchs and a whole bunch of other people he's got to play with. Whereas Xi Jinping here is pretty much the man completely in power. There's no opposition at all. He's pretty much had them also all murdered. And many people at this point even feel that Xi Jinping doesn't even get good intelligence reports anymore because everyone's terrified to tell him anything he doesn't want to hear. So it's not so great over there. But anyway, I'd say Xi Jinping, another one, another LSI. So that's 3 betas. Then we can hop on over to Israel. Does it even pop up on the map, or is Israel too small? Yeah, it's pretty much too small. It would be, yep, right there. Bing, itty bitty. So Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu, I think it's a little bit questionable. Some people might say this, some people say that. I've heard LIE, I've heard LSI, I've heard SLE, and I think all 3 of them are valid points, uh, types, I should say. Personally, I think LSI. I'd say LSI for Netanyahu. Um, to me, he has a lot of things in common. When I look at Putin, for example, even their style of just communicating is very similar. It's amazing to me to see, and that's not Netanyahu, by the way, for those of you staring at the screen wondering what's up with that. It's amazing to me. There he is. It's amazing to me that if you go back far enough, and this is an interview, for example, from 1982, and there are many more, you can go back, I think, even as far as the late 70s. Netanyahu has had basically the same position his entire life, going all the way back to the 70s. I don't feel that he's a very flexible minded guy. He's somebody that has his ideology and his viewpoints on the world, and he just kind of reiterates that over and over again for the past 40 years. So to me, LSI makes the most sense. I would still be open to see what counter argument somebody has for that, but I would say LSI. And just to kind of point out a few things, to me, I feel like you could just look at him and he reminds me a lot of um, Putin. His mannerisms, that steely-eyed, sitting there, kind of serious demeanor all the time. He'll slip a joke in every once in a while. He's not quite as cold and dead as Putin seems to be, but you could also say that's a cultural thing. Keep in mind that Netanyahu is from Israel. It's a more democratic country. You got to have a little more personality, a little more Western in style. Russian culture tends to not be quite as animated. It's just kind of how it is over there. So there's just some cultural differences you have to bear in mind. But anyway, just briefly, just to kind of look at them.
The stark struggle of the Jewish people to return to their homeland, and once returned, to secure it for future generations. And he really thought of himself in those terms. And I think he drew inspiration from the Bible, from the biblical heroes, yes, the kings. These people were alive for him, and he followed their example.
Well, I understand that he took his troops by those sites and said, now here's where David fought, or here's where the Maccabees fought.
He used to stop in marches, or in the middle of exercises, when they'd come to a site of an ancient battle, and he would show the troops. He'd never force people to listen. He said, those of you who are not tired, come with me, and I'll tell you something about this place and what happened here. And he did that again and again throughout the years, and touched hundreds and thousands of people in Israel with that kind of evocation of the historic spirit of ancient Israel.
Well, now, at his funeral, Moshe Dayan wept. What did he tell you about your brother?
He came to us, tears streaming down his face.
Yep, keeps going.
Control over them. If we didn't give any, we wouldn't have any control. Well, now, how much can you do with $100 million in a terrorist camp?
Well, I think that they're paying basically blackmail money. They're not having any control whatsoever. The people who control the PLO, if at all, are the Soviets and not the Saudis. What the Saudis are doing is funneling, paradoxically, the main force that operates today outside the organized armies of the Soviet bloc against the Western interest and American interest, and that's the PLO.
What do they plan to do with terrorism? What is the ultimate strategy?
It's to destabilize and to weaken and to terrorize every country in the West, every American interest, every American economic base outside the United States. It's to make America withdraw from various parts of the world and feel that it simply cannot deal with this type of malignant disease that is spreading.
So in other words, the kidnapping of General Dozier, the attack on the commanding officer in Germany, all these things are part of a pattern.
Baader-Meinhof.
Baader-Meinhof gang in Germany, the Red Brigade in Italy, these other terrorist organizations are all interconnected and all with one central goal.
Well, there certainly is a great deal of Soviet involvement with all of these groups. And the objective invariably is not to attack Bulgaria. It's not to attack Budapest. It's always American targets or Western targets or what they call the Zionist imperialist conspiracy.
What do the people in Israel feel about the United States when some of our business...
Okay, anyway. So it's interesting to me to note that Netanyahu, again, he has been super consistent about who he is, what he stands for, very on the right. I mean, there's just no ambiguity or flexibility with him. I don't think, to me, that you could say that this is a very practical-minded individual that's genuinely, and I stress that word, genuinely looking to solve problems as they come up and just solve the problem regardless of different ideological views on stuff. I don't think anybody really seriously believes that Netanyahu ever truly bought into the idea of a two-state solution. I think he was just kind of always really dead set on his views and so on. So I would say that the NE side is very weak. It's very weak. It's also interesting that if you ever listen to him speaking or look up quotes from Netanyahu and so on, like it's very one-track minded, very much about the struggle of Israel, the fight for its independence and freedom, and struggle against the world and so on. It seems like he just never really talks about anything else but this. This is his singular passion and thing that he's all about. I mean, just nothing else to ever really get into. Kind of amazing in that sense. Anyway, so back to the little map. So another LSI in my view. So that makes 3 LSIs as I see them: Netanyahu, Putin, and Xi Jinping. Interesting that these 3 countries are all currently in war. Now, we don't exactly know who the hell is in charge of Hamas in Gaza. I don't actually know who the hell's in charge of Iran at the moment, so I'd have to look into that. Now, for those who think that, well, does this mean that, Jason, every political leader is somehow a beta type? No, I don't think so. If you go over to the United States, you know, at the moment, I'm kind of liking the argument of ESE for Joe Biden. Really am. It is, however, interesting that his opposition right now with Donald Trump is an SLE. So back to beta. But I don't think Joe Biden is really a beta type. And also, since we're already here in Canada, Justin Trudeau, I would say is most definitely an ESE. Yeah, I'm not gonna bother, but you can look him up. Justin Trudeau, ESE. I think he's a slam dunk ESE. In fact, Biden, we might have to have a conversation when it comes to Biden, but not when it comes to Trudeau. I think he's ESE all the way. So that's a couple of guys there that will be alpha quadras. France. France. What about France? Can I pull some shit up over here? Let's see. Macron. Let's just go to Macron. Macron. You know what I'm talking about. Come on. Yeah. French President Macron over here. Right. He's recently been talking about sending French troops into Russia, which is probably really just because he's pissed off that a lot of the French were pushed out of some of these countries here, particularly Niger recently. And a lot of the blame is to go to the Russians who have been sending the Wagner Group and other private military companies into the area, destabilizing it, pushing French out. And maybe this is a way in which Macron can feel like he could stick it to the Russians by sending troops over here, which is bullshit. That is not going to happen. That sounds like a ridiculous bluff. Which makes it sound like maybe third SE or something. That it just, yeah, I don't know that. But I kind of, when it comes to Macron, there was a moment there where I thought LIE might work for Macron. I've heard arguments for EIE, and I gotta say, my opinion is swinging more towards EIE for Macron, especially with a stunt like this, like just kind of declaring that the French are not ruling out sending troops and so on into Ukraine to help fight the Russians. I'm like, that is such ridiculous nonsense that I'm not thinking an LIE would say such a stupid thing. That's one of many reasons, though. He is a colorful character, especially his whole marriage relationship to a woman who's like, was it 15 or 20 years older than him? I don't know, something nuts like that. Not to judge him. Hey, do your thing, boo. But something like that. He's married to a woman who's like good 20 years older than him or more. She might be 30 years old. Something outrageous. But anyhow, yeah. So I think that might be another ESO, another beta, in my view, in the mix there in France. Gotta look into the UK's prime minister. I don't know. And a few of the characters. Nonetheless, summing it up, let's wrap it up. Russia, LSI. Over in Israel, LSI. China, LSI. France, an EIE. Ukraine, EIE. US, we have an SLE trying to get back into office. But again, I think we have a couple of ESEs here in Canada and the United States. And one thing I think you'd notice is that the ESEs seem a lot lighter, a lot less forceful. They're not trying to be very strong and warlike, and they're maybe even trying to placate a lot of people and get criticized for maybe just not being decisive enough. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, whatever, quick enough, down and dirty little breakdown. Just throwing some thoughts out there for those interested in politics, world history, things going on, whatever. Let's see what you think. I am curious to get some feedback on what people think those types are. Again, don't just say I think so and so is an EII. Okay, why? Give me something. Back up and justify your typing. Otherwise, you can say anything and it just is irrelevant, right? If I could say a turtle is EII. Okay, like why? Without your backup and justification, your opinion almost becomes irrelevant. So throw that in there, please.